Carl, what have you done?
Think anyone will notice?
Mr. Carl Jackson, right?
Carl Jackson was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. After the sudden death of his mother at the age of 11, he moved between LA and Orlando, Florida, trying to find his way in life.
So I'm clearly a Carl Jackson fan.
Carl Jackson.
Carl Jackson.
Carl Jackson.
Although he was introduced to hard work, faith, and family values, as a struggling teen, he wandered down the path of least resistance, finding himself jailed twice. By the grace of God, he attended an evangelical church and found that there was a better way and accepted Jesus Christ as his Savior.
There's just no fake stuff about Carl Jackson.
Now, on the Salem Podcast Network, Carl has launched on a journey to help people of all races and backgrounds to discover facts of America's true past, as well as realize the benefits of utilizing their God-given gifts and talents, which far outweigh any benefit from a government subsidy or program.
Real dangerous out here. Let's roll, Carl.
Okay, going fast.
Redeemed, rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Listen, we have a fantastic guest for you today. We're going to get down to the nitty gritty. You're going to find out some truth as far as Putin is concerned about, as far as what is going on in Ukraine. We are joined today by the author of Putin's Playbook, Russia's Secret Plan to Defeat America, Rebekah Koffler. Welcome to the Carl Jackson Podcast.
Thank you very much, Carl. Happy to be here with you and your audience.
All right, so listen, you have to be slammed right now. I mean, and you were talking about this a little offline. I want to get into this right away. You predicted what was going to happen with Russia as far as the invasion of Ukraine is concerned. You are a former DIA officer, Defense Intelligence Agency. Also, you worked with the CIA, clandestine with the CIA. So some people might be a little intimidated and scared by that. But anyway, it's a very fascinating background. You were telling us that some people didn't want this book to come out. Tell us who and why.
So, Carl, as a former intelligence officer, I was required to submit the manuscript for a review to my former agency, DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency. We're a military counterpart to the CIA. We provide support to the warfighter. I submitted the manuscript. At first, they weren't responding to me. We had to change the publication date, delay it. So, again, they weren't responding to me. Finally, at the 11th hour, they responded and they said, oh, there's a whole bunch of classified information. Well, that wasn't true at all. So what happened was they really didn't like any of my criticisms, of the inability to really properly collect intelligence on the Russia target, their failure to understand Putin, and failure to really develop a counter plan, because Putin has been working on it for 20 years. And so they blacked out 31 pages worth of information claiming that it was classified. But really what it was information embarrassing to them that exposed how terribly they've bungled up Russia threat and some other things that they did that they shouldn't be doing.
When you say embarrassing to them, are you speaking specifically of the DIA? Are you speaking of the Biden administration?
So actually both. With regard to the Biden administration, is the following. So the book came out in July, right? But I finished it during the Trump administration. So I briefed scores and scores of President Obama's Pentagon officials on the Russian threat and what Putin was preparing for, right? The Playbook.
Right.
This is what the title of my book basically describes the entire plan that Putin that was developed on Putin's orders. The Obama officials didn't want to hear because they wanted a reset with Russia. I briefed the Pentagon. Wow. I briefed scores of intelligence officials, the National Security Council, the White House, NATO. The Obama people were, and remember, Joe Biden was his vice president.
Right.
So he was in a position to really pay attention to the threat instead of, remember Obama was mocking Senator Romney when Romney said, Romney must have listened to his intelligence briefings. And so this is a complete failure of the Obama 2.0 crew, which is Joe Biden's national security, quote unquote, expert apparatus. Jake Sullivan, Anthony Blinken. This is the same crowd that have already embarrassed us with the mistranslated, reset button, the gadget. It's like, it's all of this is embarrassing.
Okay, so this brings some clarity to what's going on now, because I want you to bring perhaps some either legitimacy or delegitimize some of the things that are being said out there, even some things that I may have said. If I'm wrong, I want to be correct on this, but this makes total sense. I look at what's happening with Ukraine, and it's almost as if the Biden administration was inviting, and listen, I don't like conspiracy theory or whatever, but this does not make sense to me whatsoever. We could have, if we wanted to, arm Ukraine more so. President Trump did it. What is it? Did President Trump, did you have his ear? Did anyone have his ear? It seems like even though there was this narrative of this Russia collusion hoax, it seems like President Trump got it right. It seemed like there was a healthy respect of Putin. But when I look at what's happening with Biden, it totally doesn't make sense to me that they would just let Putin run ramshot through Ukraine. And it's almost like this hands-off approach. And there's a lot of conspiracy theory out there, so I want you to clear it up. Obviously, there was corruption with Biden and his son in Ukraine, so on, etc. What's going on with the Biden administration? Is it just that they want this reset with Russia at all costs, no matter what Putin does? What's really going on?
So let me set the record straight with regard to former President Trump and his Russia policy, because it's very important. He has been maligned in the media. This whole Russia-Trump collusion is science fiction. And I revealed it in my book, how the corrupt officials of the spy agencies, DNI Director James Clapper, FBI Director James Comey, and CIA Director John Brennan, all of them within the Obama administrations, they have weaponized the intelligence resources, misdirected them in order to dig dirt on Trump to unseat a democratically elected president, right? Meanwhile, Putin was modernizing his military in order to operationalize his playbook, or the master plan, the 5-point plan that I described in my book. Trump actually pursued the most robust policy against Russia since Ronald Reagan. Here are the things that President Trump did. Yes, it is true, Carl, that Trump never called, Putin the killer or never called him anything nasty. But what's the point? Trump is not afraid of words. Putin is not afraid of words, right? Putin is a cold-blooded former KGB officer who has authorized assassinations. He's not going to be afraid of Joe Biden calling him a killer. He knows he's a killer. So what Putin is afraid of is action, and that's what Trump provided. Here are the top 3 things that Trump did, and there are a lot more, but we need a separate show on Trump's anti-Russia.
You know what? We do. Honestly, I would love that, as a matter of fact, so we'll have to get you back for that. But what are the 3 things?
So real quick, President Trump stood up U.S. Space Force, which is a very, very important step. The Russians actually stood up their Space Force in 2001, Carl, because they understood the importance of space warfare as part of what they call new generation warfare. They also believe that we are super reliant on space, and they have a plan to deafen and blind our satellites so we can't prosecute warfare. So Trump understood that, but it took like 17 years. All of these other presidents before somehow could not do that, right? Second thing Trump did, he authorized offensive cyber operations against our adversaries, such as the Russians, because they conduct routinely cyber attacks. Obama didn't do it. He was too scared. And the third thing that Trump did, he authorized the development of a low-yield nuclear warhead for our forces, U.S. forces, and that goes to neutralize Russians' very sophisticated nuclear doctrine. And there's a lot of other things, like I said, that Trump did. So Biden administration, just like the Obama administration, first wanted to seek a reset with Russia, right? But now they understood. Now, hopefully, they understand. Putin does not, like you said earlier, Putin does not respect Biden. He just doesn't. His intelligence services has concluded that Biden is a weak president, both in terms of his policy and also possibly cognitively impaired, right?
Right.
Whether it's true or not is irrelevant. It's what the Russians think, and because they base their actions based on that understanding and that assessment. And this is why we see Putin being very confident, very cocky, aggressive. It's because he doesn't respect our president, our chief executive.
Okay, now that makes sense. Let me ask you about this. Obviously, there was an invasion of Georgia in 2008, and then we fast forward to 2014. Putin annexes Crimea. And then at some point, in this is something that I want you to speak to as well. We're just in the last couple of days finding out or having confirmed that there's been some labs that have been, and again, I don't want to get conspiratorial, but I do want to ask the question because a lot of people are wondering. We find out about these labs inside of Ukraine. Perhaps the United States is admitting that we had some labs there in conjunction with Ukraine. Is it possible? I know Putin was thinking long ball. Is it possible that Putin has been threatened more recently as of 2014? Did he just make up his mind as of 2014 that he wanted to take some of Ukraine? Was he threatened by the some people are calling it a coup of the former president of Ukraine that was basically run out of office, Viktor Yanukovych, in 2014. Is there some truth to that, or clear this up for us where there's no fog? If you could help us out here.
Sure. Yes, there is truth to it, but it goes much further, Carl, than 2014. Okay. Putin unofficially declared war on the West in 2007 during his speech at the Munich Security Conference, where he openly declared that Russia will no longer live by the international rules and laws created by the United States and NATO during the time when Russia was weak and was not able to make sure that its voice was heard. Then in 2010, Russia declared officially in its military doctrine that the United States and NATO presented a security threat to Russia, and that placed a requirement on the Russian military to develop a countermeasure. Since there's a threat, then there needs to be a plan to defeat that threat. This is what.
Okay, so let me just stop you for a sec. So I want to make sure that I'm hearing you correct. So in 2007, it was Putin who first said, "Listen, I want to be, I feel threatened by these people, so I'm going to strategically work on Russia's behalf." Am I getting that right? I just want to make sure I'm hearing you clearly. Okay.
Yes, that he ordered a plan, right, to develop. It was tremendous intellectual firepower went into that and tremendous resources. Why? Because the Russians fear U.S. military, because they believe we're conventionally superior. Why? Because they watched our operations for the past 20 years very, very attentively: Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria. And but they also concluded that our strategic advantage is also our strategic vulnerability, such as reliance on technology for every aspect of our warfighting capabilities, right? And we've seen that in Afghanistan. We withdrew from Afghanistan having invested, $2.2 trillion of taxpayers' money, having sacrificed 6,000 of American lives only. Okay, I'm not even counting. And we withdrew, right? Even though we have the best warfighting force in military history, we have the best technology. So the Russians knew that, and that's when they started developing this plan. With regard to his security concerns, because it's very important to understand, and thank you for asking that question, because this is something that is not really covered in the main media.
Right.
Here are the concerns. During the Cold War, the distance between the NATO forces in St. Petersburg, the second largest city in Russia, was 1,000 miles. With the admission of the Baltics, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, that distance has reduced to 100 miles.
Okay.
NATO was stood up as a military alliance, specifically, targeting Russia to neutralize the Soviet threat during the Cold War. Okay, this is legitimate act, but because the Russians, the Russian history is basically full of wars. They have lost 20 million people during what they call the Great Patriotic War. Every single invasion came from the West, with the exception of the Mongol Tatar invasion dating back to 1238 or something. And so Putin wanted to make sure that there's something that they call, strategic stability, right? It dates back to the mutual assured destruction. So he felt that NATO encroachment is really presenting a threat because there's no strategic buffer anymore, okay?
Right.
And that is the threat. Whether so that's his decision calculus. And because Putin believes that if a fight is unavoidable, you must strike first. Here's the strike that he is waging right now. He struck Ukraine because he does not want Ukraine to be part of NATO. He said it was a red line. No one listened to him. And so now he's operationalizing his doctrine. So I want to make sure that people understand I'm not pro-Putin. I wrote this book where I actually want American, but I wanted to present his side because that's how he's thinking, and that's why he's acting today.
That is honestly, that is so important because, all right, so he said it's legitimate then to say, and the word that's being used is the United States provoked. I don't know if that's the right word, but if we knew his red line, and again, I don't want to minimize, I believe Putin is evil. But this was his red line. He was concerned that the United States perhaps was meddling too much. He did not want Ukraine to be overly influenced by Westerners, if you will. And this was it. And NATO, honestly, NATO are appearing to be completely feckless. So I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I just want to make it emphatically clear. No one is defending Putin, but I think it's very important to clear this stuff up because I don't believe Putin is crazy. And by the way, let me just reiterate, we are speaking to Rebekah Koffler, the author of Putin's Playbook, Russia's Secret Plan to defeat America. Obviously, you can tell she's extremely knowledgeable on this stuff. So please go out and buy the book from Regnery Publishers. Putin's Playbook, again, is the name of the book, Russia's Secret Plan to Defeat America by Rebekah Koffler, who is our guest today. So Putin isn't crazy. I mean, I hear all these reports. Putin is crazy. Putin is out of his mind. And I go back and read some of his, I think it was 92 thesis. And I'm like, the guy just sounds like he's the same guy he's always been. Or is he crazy, Rebekah?
No, Carl, he's absolutely not crazy. He's very rational. He's the same person he's always been. He is, there's a school of thought that says Putin is a brilliant strategist, and some people minimize that. They say, no, he's just a tactician. He's opportunistic. Putin is a strategist and serious American analysts share this analytic assessment, such as Angela Stant and Fiona Hill, who was President Trump's Russia advisor, even though she's kind of on the left side, but she's very sober on Putin's assessment of who he is, right? So he planned it for 20 years, very methodically, very gradually. They studied our vulnerability. He sent sleeper agent spies into the United States who could understand the dynamics within our society, right? Remember those that Obama gave back to the Russians? Instead of keeping them here, debriefing them, flipping them over and working for us, Obama just sent them back. Joe Biden sent some Russian hacker, a very, very dangerous Russian hacker back to Putin. You know, so these people really do their homework. They understand us. This is why they were able to intervene in 2016 U.S. election, right? Not to elect Trump, but to cause unrest, to foment disorder, right? So, so this is how they work. I have interviewed Carl myself for my own podcast that I just started, Censored But Not Silenced. I interviewed a U.S. psychiatrist, a forensic psychiatrist, medical doctor, who analyzed Putin's behavior. And this person actually is also a former Air Force officer. He evaluated our American nuclear missileers for mental stability before they went into silos to guard our nukes, right? Here's what this psychiatrist told me. There are absolutely no mental anomalies in Putin. He's a typical authoritative type leader, you know, who cares about his country. He doesn't care. And like from the cultural standpoint, Carl, you know, I don't remember if you mentioned this, but I was born and raised in Russia. So
yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mention that, but you're right. Yes, please.
So I understand his mindset because my cognitive process was formed there. I can think as a Russian and I can think as an American. And believe me, the Russians don't think like Americans. And in fact, other cultures don't think like Americans either. Chinese don't, Iranians don't, right? So
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. It's astounding to me, Carl, that people talk about Putin thinking, like basically mirror imaging, thinking that he should be acting like an American, you know, like this polite person. That's not how Russians act. He's totally within the norms of Russian behavior.
You know what?
Yeah.
You know, I appreciate you saying that, and I feel like that's part of the problem. I almost feel like in America, we've taken freedom for granted so much that we cannot recognize someone that's just evil. Like, I don't think he's crazy. I mean, I think he's evil. I think he's a bully. I think he's a tyrant, if you will. But I'm like, I don't think he's crazy. I just think that's the way he works, because that's the way he's always known to work. You talk about in your book how there are some, and I wrote it down, how some things shaped him. What was it? The blockade of the Leningrad. Yeah, his personal family experience surviving World War II, the collapse of the Soviet Union, his athletic training, of course, his intelligence career. This is a simple guy, I think, and we try to make him too complicated. He wants to build back the old Soviet Union, and it's not much more complicated than that, I don't think. And I want to get your response to that, but also let me tag this on. We experienced some cyber attacks here within the United States under the leadership of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and we did absolutely nothing. Did we do absolutely nothing because we were so the Biden administration are so desperate for this Russian reset, much like they are with Iran? And did Putin see that as, okay, if they're not going to defend this, I can go for the gusto. I can do whatever I want.
You nailed it, Carl. It's all of what you just mentioned plus the following. It's sheer incompetence, okay? Like I said, we've known this for years, but because we lack cultural expertise, language expertise in the national security apparatus, we can't accurately assess what the person is up to. And even when we have every possible piece of intelligence on what, Putin was planning to do, we still somehow don't believe it because to us it sounds crazy. And we think if it sounds crazy to us, he must be crazy too. And therefore, he's not going to do that. So it's incompetence. We knew what was going to happen, and yet we didn't protect our satellites. So they're vulnerable right now. You think cyber attacks are awful. Wait until, Putin starts waging space warfare. Okay? We didn't protect our satellites. We didn't protect our networks from cyber attacks. Carl, the very first cyber attacks that the Russians unleashed on us dates back also 20 years ago. It was codenamed Moonlight Maze, right? It used to be super classified. Now it's out in the open.
Moonlight? Did you say Moonlight Maze?
Moonlight Maze. It's a code name. It's a code name. So they exfiltrated massive amounts of data from our government networks, military networks, weapons labs, Carl, okay? And where do you think all of this stuff goes? All of this stuff gets saved in order to prepare for the battlefield. Every cyber operation, they exfiltrate data, they put it into the plan. Again, they put it, and this has been going on for 20 years, and yet, no, it's not just like Joe Biden. Basically, except Trump, every single president has been tricked by Putin. Remember how George Bush looked into his eyes and he saw a soul. So it's really,
my God.
I know. Trump is the only one because Trump, I guess, he's kind of like a street smart guy as well.
Right.
So he recognized, another, and like Trump was not going to be tricked into any of this stuff. Yes, like he kind of played it up, with Putin, tried to, but Trump understood how to work Putin, okay?
And then Putin understood that Trump understood. I think there was a mutual respect. I mean, and not in the way that I think Westerners comprehend respect, but it's like Putin knew that he couldn't push Trump around. Yeah. And he just got it. He understood that Trump got him.
Totally. Yes. Putin feared Trump because Trump is unpredictable, right? Look at how the media was reacting to every time, Trump, I don't know, sneezed or burped, right? I'm just using this metaphorically. The media would just jump. He completely dominated the media cycle, right? So of course, Putin knew that he was not going to mess around with Trump, and nothing happened on Trump's watch. Now comes in. So here's another point for you, Carl. A lot of people ask me, why did Putin decide to do this now? Well, Putin believes now is the window of opportunity because we have a weak administration right now in the White House. And because, as I said, they watch very closely our internal domestic politics, right? And they know we're extremely polarized right now along various political, racial, immigration status lines. And they're actually amplifying those. And so Putin is thinking, if a strong U.S. leader comes back, into the White House, if there's a backlash and Republicans put in their chosen president, somebody like Trump, then I'll bet the
now or never.
It's going to be very difficult for him to execute his playbook. So that's why the invasion of Ukraine, in addition to the fact that we've been inviting them to NATO, that's the decision calculus that Putin uses.
Okay, yeah. So it's now or never for him. He sees this Western encroachment. He figures this is the time to fight it back with this feckless administration that we have in the White House now. Tell me a couple of more things that I'd like to know. So we understand why Putin has decided to invade Ukraine. Joe Biden's hands-off approach, leads way, in my opinion, to much conspiracy theory. But again, I just want to reiterate it or ask you, I should say, it's as simple as Biden just wanting basically to kiss, for lack of a better term, kiss Putin's butt, like Putin, do whatever you want. I mean, I still don't fully comprehend, without going more conspiratorial, why the heck there's such a complete hands-off approach to Putin. Is it just fecklessness? Is it just incompetence? Or is there some type of benefit for Biden to say, do whatever you want, Putin? I don't fully understand that. Help me understand.
Sure, Carl. So there are two additional things to what you just mentioned. So first, it's corruption, right? The Russians have they have the information. They've been watching very closely the story with the Hunter Biden laptop, and basically all the trails leading to President Biden, right? Hunter Biden had, all kinds of corrupt deals with Russian oligarchs, including, the widow of the former mayor of Moscow. And so the Russians believe that they have compromising information that they can push. Now, this is what the Russians believe, okay? I'm not trying to say this is like true. I haven't done my own investigation, but Miranda Devine did her investigation, right? So there's a book on the laptop from hell. So, but what's important is what Russians believe, because they act on those beliefs, right?
That's such an important statement. It's such a simple but important statement. Russia acts on what they believe.
It's true.
And so if they and they know that they have Joe Biden because he is corrupt. So wow, this speaks profoundly to why it's important that we don't elect a man to serve as our nation's leader that is corrupt as Joe Biden.
Right. And then, Carl, just the second thing that I wanted to mention is Joe Biden understands that we don't have a plan. We don't have a counter plan to Putin's playbook, because he was sleeping at the wheel when he was vice president in the Obama administration. And guess what? Every single war game that I participated in, and believe me, we've simulated a whole bunch of red on blue, right? Red being the adversary, blue being the good guys, us. Blue lost. We lost to Russia, okay? And so Joe Biden understands right now that we don't have a plan. He's grasping at straws right now. He made sanctions the centerpiece of his entire Russia policy.
Which is worthless, right? It's
so absurd. And the reason why they're trying to make it sound that Putin is crazy and all that, they're trying to, excuse Putin's actions. Because if he's crazy, you can't really charge him with anything, right? Because you don't charge a mentally incapacitated person, right? Don't we have something like that in the United States? And second,
oh my God! So Putin's going to get away with everything.
And second, Carl, is if Putin is crazy, it excuses every single expert, so to say, of failure to understand him, because who can understand a crazy man? God. Who can possibly predict? This is what they are trying to do. And it is completely despicable. But so Biden knows, because we don't have a plan, we can't really engage Russia, because we would lose unless we risk. So unless we actually risk nuclear war, and it would be catastrophic, because Putin is prepared to go to that level of warfare, and we are not. Again, they've done their homework. They know how sensitive we are to casualties. They believe that they can outsuffer us in terms of casualties if there's a war like that, which they, by the way, believe is inevitable, and that's why they've been preparing a plan. But we think
Oh
it's
my
crazy. Obama people said every time I briefed, said, why are you telling us about the war with Russia? We're not going to go to war with Russia. And we would be like,
So
well, you
eye-opening.
don't think you're going to war with Russia, but they think so. So you might want to listen and prepare, even if you don't think it's going to happen. Isn't that a good idea? Well, they didn't.
Yeah.
And that's why right now we can't even provide viable support to Ukrainians because they are afraid of tripping Putin's red line again.
So eye-opening. So whether it's not conspiracy, but whether we believe it or not, in Putin's eyes, he's protecting Russia. We provoked we provoked him, whatever, just because his actions are based upon their belief system, not Westerners' belief system. Last thing that I want to ask you, and this has been eye-opening, Rebekah, I'm going to have to get you back. I am speaking to Rebekah Koffler, the author of Putin's Playbook, Russia's Secret Plan to Defeat America. Make sure you go out and get this book. Book her for your own interview. For those of you that are out there and in the talk radio space, podcast space. The last question I want to ask: China. And now I've even said this, and I want to be corrected if I'm wrong, but some of the media reports that we're hearing is Putin is going to be beholden to China because there's a debt issue. China is going to have to pay. China is going to have to pay their debt. Putin is perhaps becoming a liability somewhat to China, messing with China's credibility, so on, etc. Speak to that, if you will. China and Russia. Is Putin beholden, or is he weakened now by China?
So this is again called a mistaken narrative. It reveals again the misunderstanding of who Putin is, right?
Okay.
Putin is a strategic planner. So Russia perceives China as its security threat number 2. Okay? It's very important to understand. And he would never do anything to really be indebted to China. It's because just like there's a playbook for the United States in the event a war unravels between Russia and the U.S., there's also a playbook against China because they share a very long border. The Chinese are encroaching also upon Russian territory in the Far East by intermarrying with the Russian women and trying to really cultivate, that land with the idea to just move in a non-kinetic, non-military way. Putin knows that, and this is why he withdrew from the INF treaty, because he needed to develop, special capabilities to deal with China. So here's the deal with regard to what Putin did on the economic front to sanction-proof his economy, but without really being entirely indebted to China. So top 3 things. First, Putin pursued a de-dollarization strategy with regard to its Russian sovereign wealth fund, whereby all the dollar holdings, all the 40 billion of it, have been zeroed out in favor of the Chinese yuan, the euro, and gold, right?
Wow.
Second, he has beefed up its foreign exchange reserve to an all-time high of $630 billion. It's one of the largest in the world. And then the third thing is he has been redirecting exports to China, it is true, and also encouraging or even directing. Putin doesn't encourage. Wrong choice, Rebekah. Putin directs his industries to develop an import substitution program, whereby instead of importing certain things, he directed its industries, specifically technology and pharmaceutical, medical, to produce indigenously certain products and services. And so this is already baked into his decision calculus. He knew we were going to put sanctions on him, and he's been preparing for it. Now, that is not to say that the sanctions will not have impact. Yes, they will hurt the Russian people. I don't want to minimize this, but here's another sort of cultural difference. Here's how the Russians think about that. Putin, and I actually heard today, I was listening, I have the Russian, TV at home because it's, I'm an intel person. I listen to the adversary. When the adversary speaks, I listen very carefully and I analyze it and I do intelligence briefing. Instead of like shutting them out, you have to know what your adversary is doing. This is Sun Tzu, right? The ancient Chinese military strategist told us, know your adversary, know yourself and know your adversary. So here's the decision calculus. Whatever economic hurt the sanctions can bring to the Russian people, the Russians have suffered so much more during the glory days of socialism, Carl. I grew up there. We had like 3 things in the store, in the grocery store on a good day. So, and they believe that the impact that is right now on us from these sanctions, our gas prices are, at record high.
Out of control,
and we're going to have food prices out of control because a lot depends on transportation. So they think, and this is a quote, that we cannot take a strike, meaning a strike economically, because we are just not used to this type of shortages. They believe we're spoiled. We can't really tighten our belt the way that the Russians are. And so they are waiting it out. They said today is the West aimed at Russia with economic sanctions, but it shot itself.
Oh, so my God. That is...
It's, again, like, we didn't think it through. And I consult, some economists on geopolitical risk, right?
Yes.
And these people and they tell me the economic stuff, right? So we have a recession coming in. No one has thought it through. Right now, excuse me, Biden is blaming Putin for our gas prices, but in reality, he didn't really have a plan for this.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I've spoken about that actually yesterday on the podcast. This is, the fact that you'll blame Russia for the oil prices when they've basically regulated energy companies out of federal waters and federal lands. It's just completely asinine. I don't think people are going to buy into it. But listen, I got to tell you, Rebekah, we'll close the podcast down today, but we're going to have you back. I got to be honest with you. This podcast, this interview went even better than I expected. Your knowledge of the situation is just phenomenal. I appreciate you so much coming on. And again, I'm speaking to Rebekah Koffler, the author of Putin's Playbook, Russia's Secret Plan to Defeat America. It almost feels like, Rebekah, I'll say this in closing, that I got to be honest with you. I feel like Putin is exposing us as a paper tiger right now, particularly with this administration in office and some of the weaklings that we have running our military right now, to be honest. So we definitely didn't think through this. You've cleared up a lot, and honestly, you've brought more questions to mind that we don't have time to get to. So we're going to have you back. But Rebekah Koffler, again, author of Putin's Playbook, thank you so much for joining us today on the Carl Jackson Show podcast.
Thank you, Carl. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And for all of you that are watching, please be sure to make sure you subscribe to this podcast anywhere podcasts are found: Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble. You can check out my website, carljacksonshow.com, Twitter and Parler at Carl Jackson Show, Facebook, Carl Jackson Radio, and coming to Truth Social. God bless you guys. Until next time, don't grow weary doing good.